In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Hi everyone, welcome to Doomed to Fail. I'm Farz, joined here. Fuck it up again. Hi everyone.
No, you didn't. That's your name.
That is my name, but that's not how. So I got
Okay,
to do this.
go.
I gotta do the funny.
Okay.
Hi everyone. Welcome to Doomed to Fail, the podcast where Taylor and I desperately want to be rich and famous. So please subscribe to everything and please rate it, and then tell your friends to rate it and subscribe and listen. And if you don't want to listen, that's fine. You can actually turn the volume off. Let it just run in the background because the algorithms don't know that you're listening. So there's always
Great idea.
Always a solution to the problem. I'm Farz. I'm joined here by Taylor. Taylor, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm tired. I locked myself out of my house last night, and I sat there for 2 hours in 40-degree weather, waiting with no clothes on, basically waiting for a locksmith, which was awesome. My dog looked at me. She was like staring at me, like, "You realize this is stupid, right?" Like she literally was giving me that eye.
She's real embarrassed, I bet. Yeah, I was gonna ask about the weather. So it wasn't raining? I don't know.
That was at the very least, it wasn't raining. So that's why
you had your phone.
I did have my phone.
Did you have your phone?
If I didn't have my phone, I don't actually know what I would have. What do you do? Like, I don't know.
Walk to a neighbor's house and hope they don't call the police. I don't know. Yeah.
I guess.
Were you wearing shoes? I don't know.
Yeah, I was wearing shoes.
That's good at least. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you got in, and don't do that again.
Yeah, I'm gonna try my best. Taylor, did you want to call out the most recent addition to the media channels portfolio of the Doomed to Fail network?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I started uploading our audio to YouTube. So it's just like our picture and then the audio, but I know that YouTube is a big platform for listening to podcasts. So I put everything on there, and our episode about Alex Murdaugh and him being a murderer has 180 or something views already. I don't know if people are listening to the whole thing. It also has 2 thumbs downs, which I feel like is not necessary, and I can't find out who thumbs downed it. But we did gain 2 more subscribers. So now we have 4 subscribers. And so yeah, that's a fun way to listen to it. So if you're on YouTube, please subscribe. I'll put the link in our in the notes, but it's just like Doomed to Fail podcast at YouTube. And I want everyone to subscribe. Just come on in there. It's another way to listen to it. That's super fun. And then also we've been hopping on Instagram this week. I posted something about RFK Jr. making an exploratory committee to run for president. And I have several crazy people wrote comments about how he's a great man and a great liberal and upholds his family's legacy. And then when I go to their profiles, there's one person who's literally, their entire profile is trying to get ChatGPT to confirm that trans people aren't real. And I'm like, grow up. That's so dumb. What are you doing with your life?
I wonder how we strung the theory together that you use ChatGPT. I don't know. I mean, I guess ChatGPT is pretty powerful. So how many views did you say we had on the Dope Murdaugh, your family?
I think like 180. I can look.
Okay, we're at 183 because you messaged me yesterday saying 120. So wait, at 8 p.m. yesterday, my time, we had 128, and then we went up by 60 as of this morning.
Yeah.
In like 14 hours.
I know. I think that's because of some keywords. And then also people started watching the other ones. So Traitors and Terrorists, Rush into the Apocalypse got some views. Not as many, but a couple. So I don't know. Maybe people look around. So that's exciting.
We'll eventually.
Like that's not people we know.
Yeah, it's definitely not people we know. It will eventually actually just because we record these as videos, so we will eventually just upload the videos as well.
Yeah, we'll get there.
I need to learn how to edit better, as y'all already can tell from my regular editing.
I think you do great. You taught yourself how to do it in like 4 minutes, so great job.
So Taylor, first off, who's going first today? Is it me?
Yeah, it's you.
Okay. Do you want to tell us what your drink is, and I'll segue into the true crime and tell them what my drink is?
Yeah. So for me, we're gonna drink more wine because we're going back into ancient times where wine was like water. You just drink wine. I don't know if you even drank water, because we're going to go to the Eastern Roman Empire and Byzantium later. So get your red wine out.
Byzantium. Love it.
Turn it over to you. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I will kick things off. My drink today is a drink y'all probably won't remember, because if you're much younger than Taylor and I, you won't remember much of what I'm going to talk about today. The drink is Slice Soda, which, if y'all do remember, it was basically in competition with Sprite and 7-Up for the war of the lemon flavored sodas, which we all remember, of course, in the 90s.
Of course.
The reason I picked Slice is because the pitch man back in the 90s is who I'm going to be discussing. He was really funny, and he calls the cans that they come in metallic containers and promotes it by saying if you buy 6 of them, they come with a plastic carrying container, which of course is the plastic thing that holds the 6 cans together. It's silly, it's over the top, it's a commercial. He was legitimately their pitch man, but it's also an accurate descriptor of who I'll be discussing today. This was probably one of my favorite humans we lost in a very, very tragic way. And I think you'll remember this person, Taylor. This is another one of those people, when I found out the news that they had passed, it was a complete kick to the gut. I'm going to be discussing today Phil Hartman.
Oh.
Yeah. I love being our age. I love being our age, because like we understand. These kids don't get it.
Oh, my heart.
I'm gonna get out of my rocking chair with my spittoon and straw hat in a minute. But so let's go into the bio of Phil Hartman and who he was. So Phil was born in Ontario, Canada, which I never knew. I didn't know he was Canadian. I thought he was one of ours, which he clearly is not. His early life really isn't all that interesting. He had a ton of siblings. The family moved around a bunch. That's basically the gist of it. Except there's one weird connection he has to Marilyn Manson and the Manson murders. He went to school with Squeaky Fromm. Did you know that?
Oh, no way. Charles Manson. But
what'd I say?
No way. You said Marilyn Manson.
I've been listening to a lot of rock after the Nirvana episode. Yeah, I put stuff like that on loop.
That's interesting. Squeaky Fromm is from Canada?
No. When they moved to California.
Got it.
Yeah. So
I'm gonna look up a picture of Phil Hartman and have him just smile at me during this.
I watched a lot of Phil Hartman while I was doing this. So I remember him. Hold on, I'm gonna go admonish Luna.
Okay. Oh, I'm looking at Farz is going to tell you where he remembers Phil Hartman from, but News Radio. Oh, he was so delightful on News Radio. Obviously, he was on SNL. Just like a really sweet man.
Admonishment complete, I think.
Great.
I was gonna say, Taylor, I mostly remember Phil from Saturday Night Live. I'm wondering how you remember him the most.
Definitely from SNL. I watched it like live in the 90s. I also feel like his voice comes up in like a ton of like animated things. And like whenever I hear him, I'm like, oh, it's Phil Hartman, I can tell. And then also, not recently, but like 10 years ago, we rewatched News Radio. And he was so good in that. And also, I'm looking it up and being reminded that 2 awful people were in News Radio, Joe Rogan and Andy Dick, who are both fucking terrible. So that's interesting that they just happened to be in there too. But yeah, he was so sweet in News Radio.
Okay, I'm going to disagree with you on the Joe Rogan bit, but I will agree with you on the Andy Dick bit, and both of those are going to be pretty prominent characters in this story as I go about discussing it. We can discuss Joe Rogan offline, but he is going to come up.
I'm surprised. But no, continue. Go ahead. Oh, his Bill Clinton impression.
His Bill Clinton. I watched so many of his clips where the one where he goes to a McDonald's. Okay, you know what? I'm going down a rabbit hole right now, and I'm totally derailing everything I wrote in this outline. So let me continue on, and then we'll segue back to all that stuff. But yes, SNL. I think of people of our generation, that's how you know Phil Hartman. He started attending improv classes when he was 27 years old. For work around this time, he was actually a graphic artist, and part of what he did was he would design logos and album covers. So I didn't know this about him, but he did the album cover for one of Steely Dan's albums and the logo for Crosby, Stills and Nash, which super cool, right?
That's cool. Yeah.
The comedy group that he joined was called the Groundlings. They also, throughout their, not necessarily when he was there, but it was a fairly prominent comedy troupe. So Kathy Griffin, Will Ferrell, Lisa Kudrow, Melissa McCarthy, Paul Rubin, Maya Rudolph, those were all folks that came out of this comedy troupe. And I don't know much about comedy troupes, but they kind of sound like NCAA sports programs, where like there's some programs that produce the best of the best, the cream of the crop.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like Ground Leagues is one of them. Second Cities is another one that people probably are
Yeah,
familiar.
that's the one I know is Second City. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
In this case, it's worth noting that Phil's part of the reason why the Ground Leagues became who they became, because he joined the troop a year after it was formed, and then he went on to. He's the reason why all these other folks, you know, like Will Ferrell, Maya Rudolph, and all them, have it has this reputation to attract them. And I just listed off Paul Rubin, who, if you don't know, is the actor who played Pee Wee Herman in Pee Wee's Playhouse. Another thing I learned doing this, they were in the Groundlings together at the exact same time. And during this time, Phil is the one who created the character of Pee Wee Herman. And he was in the show and he
Right,
produced a
he's
bunch
in
of them.
it.
Yeah, he's in
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I
But it all
forgot about
started,
that.
it all started during this time when they were both in the Groundlings. He's so
Yeah, because Pee Wee
interconnected.
started off as like an adult show, right? Like
Was it?
it wasn't always for kids. I think it was like a little like raunchier
Really?
in Inception, and then it was like, oh, kids like this. But I think it was because he was in it. Anyway, we can talk. Let's have a second Phil Hartman episode. We just talk about how much we love Phil
Seriously.
Hartman.
I
Okay.
could go on for like weeks on that. Like I mentioned earlier, Phil joined SNL in its 12th season in 1986. Okay, so we need to start having sections where it's like Farz starts his rant here so that people know they can fast forward from there, because it's just going to be me
Perfect.
yelling.
Can't wait.
For those of you who are younger, the SNL actually used to be amazing. There seems to be like fits and starts. So my opinion right now is I don't watch SNL. I think it kind of sucks. And every now and then, if like a skit is actually particularly good, it gets enough media play where I'll pay attention to it. But outside of that, it's not my go-to to watch.
Yeah.
There seems to be fits and starts. So there are particular cast members and seasons where when they came together, it created just comedy gold. The biggest of those years in cast members would be at the very beginning of SNL. It wouldn't last very long. If I remember correctly, it was 3 or 4 seasons where they caught lightning in a bottle. Those would be the years of John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, and Bill Murray, which are obviously like the Mount Everest of comedy, essentially. Another one of those peaks, I mean, I would argue, others might not, were several of the seasons Phil Hartman was on the show as well. So the cast members during this time were Dana Carvey. Do you remember his George Bush impressions?
Oh yeah.
Gold. Absolute gold. Chris Farley was on at this time. They overlap with each other. Chris Rock was on it. Adam Sandler, Al Franken, David Spade, and Rob Schneider. Like, to us, I think, Taylor, like our generation, like this was our, Mount Everest of comedy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely watched it all the time. I think I stayed up to watch it as well.
Yeah, same.
Because obviously, like, how else would I watched it? It's not like it was on reruns.
Yeah.
Or the internet. So yeah, I remember.
For this work happy hour thing a couple of years ago, I was out with my former boss at the time, who's a few years older than me, but like similar generation. And for some reason, we started discussing like our favorite Chris Farley skit, and one of our younger colleagues who was there with us goes, "Who's Chris Farley?" I was like, "How?"
Can you tell me who that was? You side chat me who that was.
I'm gonna say it here, and then I'm gonna send it to him. It's Marco Suarez.
Marco, unbelievable.
I'm actually just, yeah. I'm glad. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna call out another one. Morgan Sayegh. She also was there and said, "I don't know who he is either." Yeah.
Jesus Christ. That's hilarious. And also, I'm looking at pictures of Phil Hartman lovingly on Google. Do you remember you had to buy the DVDs that was like best of Phil Hartman?
Yeah.
And you'd buy the DVD and it would have like 20 skits on it.
Yeah, good old days, right?
That's nice.
The Chris Farley thing, like when I heard that, absolutely crushed me. He's actually like my favorite SNL cast member, and I actually kind of assumed he'd be number 3 on the list of all-time greatest, only behind Belushi and Murray. I found this list that ranked him number 15, which seems like insane. Like
insane.
So Kristen Wiig and Dana Carvey ranked higher, which I love both of them, but they're not better than Chris Farley.
No, no, no.
Do you remember his Chippendale character or like Matt
Oh my God.
Foley?
Well, I mean, so we again we could get into this, but like the Chippendale sketch like really hurt him emotionally.
Really?
He was
Why?
like
I've never heard
really,
this.
really upset because it's like essentially a body shaming sketch, and people are like laughing at him because of his body. And afterwards, he was just like, "What the fuck am I doing? Like, I'm just this like fat guy being, you know, taken advantage of." And he felt terrible after that. I think that I read that somewhere when I was reading sad things about Chris Farley one day. Um,
Well, now I feel
he
bad
was only like
for loving
25
it.
when he died too. Yeah, no, but I mean, it's funny, but that was his shtick. But I think he was probably like getting a little tired of it, even though he was so young. Anyway, we can talk
Yeah.
about Chris Farley later.
Well, no, we're gonna go into a little bit more of a rant here. So, the author of this, because I just like personally was like, how are you ranking these people? So he ranked Norm Macdonald 139 out of 145 of cast
What?
members. Yeah, he ranked
Okay, well,
Dennis.
fuck this list. This list makes
He
no sense.
he ranked Dennis Miller ahead of Kate McKinnon.
No,
Like,
out. Get him out.
okay, I'm gonna call him out here. His name is Rob Sheffield of Rolling Stone. And by the way, I also read your ranking of the top 100 country albums. Taylor Swift beat At Folsom Prison by Johnny Cash.
Yeah, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Shania Twain was 10 spots ahead of Loretta Lynn's Coal Miner's Daughter on his list.
No, no,
Crazy.
no. I remember watching the Coal Miner's Daughter movie with my grandma and my mom.
One of the all-time
Continue.
great albums
Yeah,
ever made. Not just country, just
get
ever.
him.
Okay, I'll stop. But I'm just saying, like, this guy seems like he's just throwing darts at a board when he's deciding who's funny and
I
who's
love
the
it.
best album. Anyways, back to the story. So again, like this era of SNL, these actors, they were basically the best thing on TV and for comedy in the early '90s, essentially. I mean, you mentioned Phil Hartman's Clint impression. That is actually the thing that started the whole how we mock presidents thing
Nice,
going forward.
nice.
Yeah. Yeah, so now we're familiar with Daryl Hannah or Will Ferrell or all those guys doing president mockery things, and really it was
Hmm.
Phil's impression of Clinton that kind of set this off. Phil would eventually leave SNL to go work at the show that you just mentioned, the sitcom you mentioned, News Radio, which, to be honest, Taylor, I've never seen it. It sounds like people who
It's
watch
great.
it
You
think
should
it's
watch
great.
it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Does it hold
yeah,
up?
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, honestly, the only part, I don't know how many. It lasts like one season after Phil Hartman dies, and it is different and so sad, and everyone's sad.
Yeah.
It's like you can feel the sadness in the room. So after that happens, I think we like maybe watched like half of it and then stop watching it because it's not the same, and everyone is just fucking heartbroken.
Yeah. Yeah, I read that he actually posthumously won an Emmy for his work on that show, so it must have been good.
No.
Between his time on SNL and News Radio, he also worked on The Simpsons, where he voiced some of the best characters that were on the show, Troy McClure and attorney Lionel Hutz, which were probably the most well known, but he did others as well. In the
Hmm.
middle of all this, he was also starring in movies. Well, sometimes starring, a lot of times doing like supporting character work and stuff like that. Generally
Hmm.
speaking, he was basically everywhere. Like his voice was so, how would you say it? Like it was so recognizable and noticeable.
You'll know it if you hear it, like it's definitely one of those things that like if you hear his voice, you'll be like, "Oh, that's Phil Hartman. I hear him
Exactly.
everywhere."
Hear him
Yeah.
everywhere. Exactly.
Yeah.
If you are familiar with his work, his typical characters come across as kind of larger than life. They're a little bit arrogant, a little bit narcissistic. It's the over the topness of how he plays these characters that make them hilarious. By all
Hmm.
accounts, from people he worked with on The Simpsons or Lorne Michaels of SNL to the team over at News Radio, Phil was considered incredibly humble and down to earth and very helpful to his colleagues and just generally a pleasant guy to be around. Again, he got his start in life, or not in life, like he got his start in comedy. His rise in prominence was so late in life that he wasn't one of those guys who was just like raised a celebrity child and like just thought he was the greatest thing in the
Hmm.
world. He knew what it was like to kind of struggle and come up, and so he was very, very thoughtful about it. He married several times. He was married for 2 years in the 80s. Then he married another woman for 3 years. And then the main antagonist of this story, Phil married in 1987. This woman her name is Bryn Omdahl. Bryn was an aspiring actress, and it seems like that and a cocktail of alcohol and narcotics were ultimately the cause of her and Phil's downfall. You
Mhm.
mentioned one of your least favorite people. Joe Rogan actually plays a part in this. So, as you mentioned, he was in news radio with Phil, and by all accounts, they were friends with each other. Yeah, they would have been pretty close to the same age, I think, actually around that time. And also because
Mhm.
the Joe Rogan podcast is so prominent and he has so many people that are on the show, there's tons of content that's out there. He's had pretty much anybody who's been on news radio, connected to news radio, connected to Phil Hartman. All of these people have done interviews on his show, and Phil Hartman comes up a lot, obviously, because
Mhm.
a lot of these, because everybody who worked with him loved him, and they were all
Yeah.
struck by what happened to him. So, like I mentioned, Joe and Phil were friends throughout their time in news radio. And to your earlier point, Andy Dick is also going to make an appearance here because he was also in news radio, as you mentioned, and he played a
Mhm.
role in this to varying degrees, depending on who you believe, on what ended up happening to
Mhm.
Phil and Bryn. From what Joe himself has said on the podcast, so much of the toxic dynamic of Phil and Bryn's relationship had to do with her career aspirations and where Phil was in life.
Mhm.
They married in
Yeah.
1987. So think about that. They got married a year after Phil gets on SNL. So he was not like the guy yet. Like he's like just his head's poking out of water basically at this point.
Right, but he still has like a really good job.
He has a good, well, so we don't really know that because if you for context, the entire cast, almost the entire cast of the previous season had been fired. So he started in 86.
Mm.
The cast of 85, which included Robert Downey Jr. and Anthony Michael Hall, all of them got fired because nothing was hitting
Weird. I don't
SNL.
remember them. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, SNL has fits and starts. So there's moments where it's comedy gold, and there's moments where it just totally sucks. And the year
Mhm.
before Phil started, it was in the totally sucks category. Taylor, this is funny. On the first episode of this season, this was season 12. That's the season he started. The announcer called him Phil Hoffman. Like it's like
Funny.
again, like they're just like amateur hour, right?
They're just like whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, again, like he wasn't who he eventually became, but by the next year, so that would have been 87, 88, his star was on the rise. He was 3 years away from being big enough to where he was on The Simpsons, which again, to younger folks, The Simpsons back then, if not paralleled, almost certainly eclipsed SNL in terms of popularity.
Mhm.
I think so,
Mhm.
right? Would you say that's accurate?
I think so. I think it was more accessible. I mean, like I said before, like I don't remember how the heck you ever watched anything like more than once. There definitely weren't like SNL reruns, I don't think, but there were Simpsons reruns. So it was on more. It had the opportunity to be on more often, right?
Yeah, and also
Makes
this,
sense.
I would, yeah, and also this would have been like the golden era of The Simpsons, like the funniest, the best, like all the most memorable stuff that The Simpsons produced. So getting on there, I would argue, was probably harder than getting on SNL because everybody wanted to be on The Simpsons, and because they have a
Yeah.
very finite number of characters they can have on there. His star was skyrocketing at this point. It was very clear, apparently, to those around Phil and Bryn that their relationship was toxic. At this point, they had two kids together, and those around Phil would notice that Bryn made it a point to embarrass him publicly, like talking down to him,
Ugh.
just basically making everyone around them feel uncomfortable in their presence. This had gotten to such a
Uh,
level. Go ahead, sorry.
You can talk about his intro in SNL with her in it. Do you know that part?
I don't remember that.
So when they do the thing where it's like Phil Hartman, I'm like it's someone like standing in New York City, like smiling, like that, how they still do
Yeah.
that, like someone like whatever. So in his, you'll see that he's at a table with a blonde woman, and that's her, and her earring is swinging like really, really fast because she wouldn't stop staring at the camera, and they had to be like, move your head, this isn't about you. And so she was so mad, and she like swung her face backwards, and her earring is swinging, and he smiles, and that's his intro.
I'm going to go
You
back
can
and
tell
watch
that
that.
she had just moved her head because people were like, stop fucking looking at the camera. No, we're not introducing you. We're introducing him.
Oh, I'm gonna go back and look at that. Yeah, I never saw that. I watched a ton of SNL skits, but I never went back to the intro. How do you remember that, Taylor?
I feel like I read that in an article that was like a, I don't know how I know that. I don't
Interesting.
know. It's in there. I don't know
Interesting.
much math. Yeah.
That and the fact that you know that Tote is German for murder are like the weirdest random things that are connected to my story that I never would have anticipated anyone knowing that you did. So
I'm full of surprises.
full surprises. Apparently, this toxicity level got to the point where Joe Rogan would frequently tell Phil he should consider the divorce. He said that he talked to him about like 5 or 6 times about this, like, hey, this isn't good. Like, we can tell something's going on. Phil didn't
Hmm.
want to, and what Joe said on the podcast is the reason he didn't want to do this was because he'd already been divorced twice, and
Hmm.
because at this time he had this squeaky clean family man quality to him in Hollywood, he thought that a divorce would
Hmm.
actually tarnish his image and inhibit his career essentially.
Okay, so we can say that Joe Rogan in this story is a good friend of Phil Hartman, but now Joe Rogan is a lunatic because he gets people to take ivermectin.
I don't I don't agree with any of this. Like you sound
What are you
I
even
had
talking about?
I had this whole discussion. Yeah, okay, so I'm not going to the whole COVID thing. I don't really like care about it. It's like I think that just generally speaking, he has this reputation as this like right wing insane person. It's like no, he was a stand up comic and like a UFC commentator, and then started a podcast and just like talks to people. Like I
That
don't.
is kind of crazy. All right, we can talk about this later. Continue.
We'll have a whole. Why don't we do a
But
Joe Rogan section?
I'm willing to say that Joe Rogan is a good friend of Phil Hartman
Okay. I think
on the
that's been
record.
documented because like everybody who's been on the podcast has also brought this up. Which again, a lot of people have been on the podcast about this. Actually, Andy Dick was on the podcast once, and that was basically enough.
Can we say
Uh,
fuck Andy Dick?
yeah. Well, I don't know even about that because like I think that the guy really has a lot of problems like psychologically and
That's true. He has a
substance
lot of like
abuse
psychological
wise.
problems.
Yeah, it's
Right.
like I don't want
That's
to
fair.
like shame him for that, but like I said before, Brent also had substance abuse issues and had tried unsuccessfully to get clean. She would bounce from one substance to the next, and at a new so this is where he comes in. At a news radio Christmas party in 1997, Andy Dick would give Bryn cocaine and cause her
Hmm.
to relapse and go back down the hard drug path. So I don't know how you
That's what
categorize
I
this.
heard. That's the thing that I heard. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you categorize this, but like to me, there's like three categories of substance users, right? There's the drinkers, there's the chill drug users, which is like marijuana, mushrooms, like organic drug users. Then there's the powders, right? There's the people who get into the powders, and then like I feel like that is a divergent path that escalates any psychological issues that might be pre-existing. Do you sense that
Sure.
too, or
Yeah, I think well, I mean, obviously there's other like has like heroin and meth and like worse things you could be on, I think.
yeah,
But
that's true.
but but yeah, definitely.
So that's what partially why I think people also put this because like sure it was cocaine, it was one time, but you're dealing with someone that has like a history of substance abuse and clearly isn't doing
Right. It's
well
not
mentally.
she's not the right person to give that to.
Right. Right.
And he knew it, right? Like he did not know. But he also has his own problems, so
Yeah,
fine.
exactly. Apparently, this caused quite a rift with the castmates because everyone loved Phil and everyone could see that Bryn
Hmm.
was unstable and they were pissed that Andy did this. Like they saw like the why would you give this person that we know that has this issue? But like again, to your point, he has his own issues. But there's also this
Hmm.
presumption that maybe he didn't know that she had a history of substance abuse and that's he was just like trying to be a good time guy, you know?
Yeah.
The fighting in the house got to such an extent that Phil would have his kids go stay elsewhere on occasions. I don't know if you've ever been in a relationship like this. I mean, I certainly have. But when you're with someone
You're not
where,
a yeller.
yeah, like when you know exactly what their triggers are, how to read their mood, and you just brace yourself for battle. That's kind of like what
Hmm.
this sounded like to me. In my mind, I can see Bryn in a robe, like sulking around the house with an empty bottle of vodka at noon, and Phil being like, "Kids, you got to go to your aunt's house tonight." Like knowing that the
Ugh, poor
next 12 hours
babies.
are going to be absolute hell. Phil
Hmm.
did try to help her for what it's worth. It's actually completely in line with what everybody says about his character. He got her into rehab a few times.
Yeah.
It ultimately failed, like I said before. And as it became more clear to him that she resented his career, he would try to pull strings in Hollywood to get her roles. She
Hmm.
did have a few roles here or there, but this is Phil Hartman. people like again,
Yeah,
you might not remember how huge this guy was back in the day. She would have had to be Nicole Kidman in this era to not be
you
in his
can't like
shadow.
catch up. Yeah.
So all this culminates on May 28th of 1998. Bryn went out to dinner with a friend and had some drinks. She gets home. Her and Phil have a fight, which seems to be the typical standard of their relationship. We don't know what it was
Mhm.
over, but regardless, he goes to bed and she stays up. She apparently still has like is doing drugs or drinking or some combination thereof. Around 3 a.m.,
Mhm.
she goes into their bedroom where he is asleep and shoots him 3 times. Once
Ugh,
in the head, once in the neck, and once in the chest, which is like a weird, like, just what were you thinking about? Just
Jesus.
going up and down like you're
It
doing
just sounds
connect the dots with his like spine.
like crazy, just like I don't know, who knows? Yeah. Ugh. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's so sad.
Yeah. And
Were
look,
the kids home?
they were, I'll get into that.
Oh no.
Going back to the
Ugh.
Andy Dick thing, later on they found out that she had a cocktail of Zoloft, cocaine, alcohol in her system. So the cocaine thing stuck after that Christmas party, apparently. Bryn leaves the house then and goes over to a former boyfriend's house, a guy named Ron Douglas, and tells him what she did. They go back to the Hartman house together, and Ron discovers that she's telling the truth and immediately calls the police.
Good job, Ron.
At this point, yeah, the police show up and the police take the kids out of the house.
Oh, she left them there?
Well, Ron was in the house too. Ron was with Bryn in the house.
But she left them there when she went to go get Ron.
Yeah, yeah, she did.
Ew.
So the police show
What
up,
did you
take Ron out of the house, take the kids out of the house. Bryn locked herself in the bathroom, and then
do?
shoots
Mhm.
herself in the head and kills herself.
Ugh. Oh.
The Andy Dick thing again, like you're familiar with John Lovitz, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, so John Lovitz was also part of this whole. I mean, all these guys, it's like L.A. comedy, right? It's the L.A. comedy scene. They all know each other,
Yeah.
so they were all part of the comedy store scene, the improv. They were on. Actually, I don't remember if Andy Dick was on SNL, but John Lovitz definitely was on SNL. And I think John Lovitz,
Hmm.
after Phil Hartman died, went on news radio as well. Do you recall that at all with that season that
I
you
don't
watched half of?
remember.
Okay.
I don't remember. I just remember. So they have him die of like natural causes, but he was like the main character. He was just such a great character on that show. Very Phil Hartman, like a very like a conceited, like funny guy.
Yeah.
So without him, it just, I mean, the whole was just ginormous. Like they never, ever, ever would have written him out of that show, you know? So it was like a plot line that they never would have had.
It's almost like the show
So
wouldn't have been. It wouldn't doesn't need to exist without that character in it.
exactly. And they all knew it and they were all just so fucking sad. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like I meant, like with the whole John Lovitz thing. So apparently he's one of the guys who really was pissed off about this. He was apparently really close to Phil, and they would get into physical fights when they would see each other. And like they're in the comedy scene in LA together. They would see each other all the time. They'd be at the comedy store. There's stories about John Lovitz just bashing his head against a bar at the comedy store when they ran into each other. Like it was to
Andy
that
Dick.
extent. Yeah,
Oh,
because that's how
I mean,
responsible that crew of people saw. And like in one of the episodes, Rob Lowe was on the Rogan podcast and he was like, yeah, I had Andy on once, definitely don't need to talk to him ever again, like we're good. Like it's like this
mhm.
caused like this like legit rift amongst that entire castmate or the crew. Like I mentioned, so Phil would have died in at the age of 49. That was in 1998. He started his rise in fame in 86, so that's 12 years, and probably like really it's 10
Yeah.
years where he's kind of living out his dream, which is kind of the fact that I find really sad. He did
Yeah.
he did the thing that they say can't be done or is hard to be done, which is finding your calling in life really late in life.
Hmm.
By this math, he would have been 37 when he got his big break that first year of SNL, which that's awesome, right?
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so awesome. As someone who has no big breaks in his 40, that's awesome.
This is our big break, Taylor. This is it. Guys, please tell your friends. Please tell your friends. Taylor needs this. She's literally crying. Um, yeah, going back to the two kids, so they ended up being taken in by Bryn's sister and her husband. Apparently Bergen, the daughter, she ended up having her own substance abuse issues, but I checked out her Insta page, which is fairly active. If you want to see, it's Bergen Hartman. She is now 11 years and 4 weeks clean from opioids and apparently happily married.
Awesome.
So good for her. Not much to
Good.
say.
Good, good, good.
Yeah, there's not much to say about Sean, the son, other than he lives in California. He's a musician and artist, and I couldn't really find much more about him on there. So hopefully he's living his best life as well. I don't know how you can after your parents do that or your mom does that, but hopefully he gets over that trauma.
Yeah.
So that is
That's sad.
Phil and Bryn. But now we're
That's
going
so
to go
sad.
to a super uplifting story, right, Taylor?
Oh yeah. I'm just sad. Hold on. Let me continue to be sad for a second. I'm looking at
He was so good. Like,
Oregon.
man, it sucks that like people don't recognize who he. I mean, if you don't know who Chris Farley is, you sure as shit don't know who Phil Hartman is. I would say Chris Farley was Chris Farley. Am I right? Yeah, seriously, Morgan. Am I right in saying that Chris Farley is probably bigger and more prominent in the public zeitgeist
so.
than Phil?
I feel like if you know nothing, you could probably be like, oh, I can picture Chris Farley, maybe you can't picture Phil Hartman, but I feel like once you saw his characters, you could picture him and definitely his voice. You could absolutely hear his voice. It's so, I don't know. It's so like
obvious.
Just as soon as you hear it, you're like, oh, it's Phil Hartman,
Yeah, I can hear Troy McClure. Like some of the best Simpsons moments were Lionel Hutz. There was one that he said he was trying to defend the Simpsons in some court case, and he goes, "Yeah, I think I understand. I watched Matlock in a bar last night. The sound wasn't on, but I got the gist of it. Like it's just, but he says it in that Phil Hartman voice that's like so self-assured. It's so good.
Yes, he plays such like this like confident guy. It's so great. It's so great. Well, I'll watch some Phil Hartman stuff tonight. Maybe some skits. Yeah, that's sad. I miss him.
Also, reminder: somebody ranked a Taylor Swift album ahead of Johnny Cash, like old Johnny Cash. Like
that makes no sense. And I like Taylor Swift a lot, but that makes no sense. Also, what was I going to say? A reminder to people to watch old SNL skits. I don't know. I'll think of something else. But yeah, thanks for sharing. Oh, don't kill your family. That was a reminder. Don't kill your family.
To Bryn's credit, she only killed her husband and not the rest of the family.
That's true. I guess. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing, Farz. That was terrible. But very, very sad.
Is your sweater like supposed to be like an OnlyFans reference, but it's only murders?
Oh, it's only murders in the building. Why would I have an OnlyFans reference sweater? It's only murders in the building, the show, in the podcast.
Oh, I don't know what
the
that
true crime
is.
podcast. It's on Hulu. It's with Steve Martin. Speaking of Saturday Night Live, it's with Steve Martin and Martin Short. And
no way.
It's great.
Okay.
Yeah, it's great. You should watch it. So, okay. So let's transfer over to our history story. And this week, I don't know if it came out this week or if it's because of you talking about Nirvana, but on Netflix, I found a 3-part documentary about Woodstock 99. And I was like, this is bananas. This is crazy. I was like, it's, if you don't know, watch that documentary. It's, trying to recreate Woodstock in 99, which did not work because like the people who attended just like were a bunch of assholes. There was tons of rioting, tons of sexual assault, a lot of crimes. They like burnt the whole thing down. And I also was wondering like, what is the Venn diagram of dudes who were at Woodstock 99 and dudes who were at the insurrection on January 6th? And I feel like that might be in Gene Tortor's circle. It's like that kind of dude,
So it's definitely the same gene type. Like if you go backwards like a couple of generations, they definitely shared an uncle, I think.
Yeah. I put definitely more than 5 people were at both places.
Yes.
I'm sure there were. So it's super interesting. And I was like, can I do Woodstock 99? And I'm like, Taylor, go back further. So I was like, what are deadly riots and insurrections of history? And there's obviously a ton, but I found one that revolves around a couple. So there is a relationship in this one. And so I want to talk about the Nika riots of 532. So all the way back.
Way back.
Going way back. I listened to one YouTube video called Deadly Moments in History of the Nika Riots, a Stuff You Missed in History Class, a Smithsonian article, just some like information about this story. So it involved a couple, Emperor Justinian and his wife Theodora. So they're like big players in this story. And we're in the Byzantine Empire, which is the Eastern Roman Empire around the year 500. And they're actually based in Constantinople. I'll talk about that in a second. Emperor Justinian I was born in Taruzium in northern Macedonia. And if you're Dan Carlin, you say Macedonia. So I might go back and forth,
I'm
but I want to do
actually
the Dan Carlin one.
I'm gonna say I'm like really proud of you for picking something where the names all sound incredibly hard to pronounce.
Thank you.
Kudos.
Thank you. I'm going to go Macedonia because that's what Dan Carlin says. But Justinian was born in 482 AD. He was a poor, humble person. He grew up speaking Latin instead of Greek. Greek was a language of the court. So this is like the Eastern Roman Empire is like more Greek, and then the Western one is more Roman, like Italian Roman. They speak Latin. So in the end, he does learn to speak Greek in his court. And I would have to like really study the way that they do like the lineage for becoming emperor. But even though he's humble and like doesn't come from super wealth, his uncle is the emperor, and his uncle is Emperor Justin, which I like laughed out like for an hour. Justin, like I know there's like Justin Trudeau is a world leader, but like Emperor Justin, I just can't. Makes me laugh.
It's
So,
like
um,
King Bill or something. Yeah.
right? I just can't. So Justin is his uncle, and when Justin dies, Justinian becomes his successor. So I don't know if it's like just kind of like next best who's like kind of related to you, because I can't imagine that these emperors had 0 sons, but it definitely is like seems to be handing off to nephews. So it's probably just like who around my circle, my family has like the most potential, I think. Probably that.
Makes sense.
So yeah. So Justin died in 1527 and Justinian became emperor. Justinian married a woman named Theodora. She was born also into humble origins, but like actually humble. Her dad was a bear keeper in the Hippodrome. So
That's
that's a fun
humble.
job.
That does not sound like a humble upbringing. That sounds
What
like
do
an
you mean?
awesome upbringing.
I mean, yes, awesome, but I don't think he like made a lot of money being a bear keeper, but also it is awesome. And like maybe she got to hug bears, which is cool.
That's very cool.
So we'll talk about the Hippodrome in a second. But, I'm thinking like, imagine, being a bear keeper, obviously terrible things happen to the bears. And also those bears probably killed a lot of people. So there's like a lot going on in like with being a bear keeper.
You know what?
It's not like a zoo.
I was romanticizing this a lot more than you just laid it out. I thought you'd like
Right.
they would start treating you like you're one of them and like you could like go forage with them and like you're a family together. But I guess there's probably a lot of abuse in that.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And you probably get a bonus every time your bear eats someone, I don't know. But it's definitely, it's not a sanctuary for bears. It's a place
Okay,
to
okay,
reward
thank you.
your bear.
Okay, that's the way I was thinking.
Yes.
Sanctuary for bears.
It's not a sanctuary for bears.
Okay. Awful situation
No.
for the animals.
I bet the bears are having a bad time.
Everyone's
Most
having a
people are
bad
having
time.
a bad time.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
I don't approve.
So so Theodora became an actress and a dancer, which is like we talked about this before, like in like ancient Roman times, like an actress basically was like the same level as a sex worker in society. She may have actually been a sex worker. That's unclear. Some people say that she was and that, before she met Justinian, but they did fall in love and they got married and she became kind of a co-ruler with him and she had a big influence in the government. So they're married, they're in charge. There was a little bit of conflict that has to do with religion. Obviously, it's a Christian society at this point. Theodora was part of the sect that believed that Jesus was many things, like also a ghost and a person. Again, I don't know. And then most people thought he was one thing, like one entity. So that's like a big deal, and just like another like reason to fight within Christianity.
This one guy started so much shit.
So yeah, so people are kind of mad about that. But it's not all religion and politics and all those things. There's also sports. So this is a sport story, mostly. So the biggest sport in the time is chariot racing. Let's talk about that in a second. So I love a sport riot. Like I don't want to be in one, but I appreciate it when Philadelphia tries to burn itself down, whether they win or lose. Like that's hilarious. Like people just like going absolutely nuts. Like that sounds really like it's fun. As long as no one dies, it sounds fun. Also, did I mention that we're in Istanbul, which was Constantinople, and that song, Why did they change it? I can't say. Maybe they liked it better that way. You know that song?
No. Who is that?
Istanbul was Constantinople. I have no idea. It's from like the 80s or 70s. I'll share it
If
later.
it's not
But
Nirvana, I'm not gonna recognize anything for the next like month.
it's not. It's not. So I do have a list of like what Constantinople was called, but it's gone through a lot of changes. But at this point, it's probably called New Rome at the moment. Oh yes. Okay. So it's called Igos, Byzantium, Augusta Antonia, New Rome, Constantinople, Constantini, Istanbul. So now it's Istanbul, but at this point, it was probably called New Rome.
Okay. So
But we're in Turkey, like modern day Turkey.
yeah, which would have been back then part of the like a much larger swath of land, like the Ottoman Empire, which I think was one of the biggest
Yeah.
empires ever. Okay.
Right. It goes over there too. Yeah. So that's where we are. In the middle of Istanbul right now, you can visit the Hippodrome. So the Hippodrome is like such a cool word. I don't even know
Yeah.
what to do. Like Hippodrome. So the Hippodrome is a place where you can watch races and other games. It still exists. You can still visit it. It's huge. It can hold like 50 to 100,000 people. It's a big stadium. You could go in and like rent cushions to sit on the steps, like the Hollywood Bowl. You could like rent a cushion and like sit on the steps and watch the races. It's a really, really long oval, like a really thin, long oval. In the middle, there's like a wall with statues that even had, I think still have an Egyptian obelisk in the middle of it. So like beautiful statues in the middle, all stone. Is huge stadium. It's obviously not, there's no like safety measures, because it's in the year 500. What you do is you race around the oval in your chariot, and it's very dangerous. So chariot racing is one of the oldest forms of sports. It involves pulling a two-wheeled chariot driven by four horses, in this case in the Hippodrome at this time. So you're kind of standing on your chariot and you're racing against other people. So like you can remember this from like Gladiator, right? Didn't they do that in Gladiator?
They did. This looks like a place you were meant to die in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very like spectator,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. Like I mean, even like
Yes.
the location of where they put the things to draw your eyes, like it's meant to be like you're all in the center of this thing, and God
Yeah.
help you if you don't do the right thing in that moment.
And we know that bears work there. So like obviously some other stuff happens too involving
Yeah,
bears and
yeah.
like eating people for sure, for sure. But chariot racing can be traced back to ancient Egypt, where they were used in warfare and hunting. It became a very popular form of entertainment and like a religious ceremony. It was considered a good profession if you could like buy your way out of slavery doing it. So if you like, so a lot of them were people, chariot racers were slaves because a lot of people died like right away. I mean, imagine
Yeah.
like you fall off your chariot, you get crushed by horses. But people who didn't die and who continued to do it would be able to eventually buy their way out of slavery because they would start to like make money. That's like the main thing there. In the Hippodrome, there is a spot for the emperor to sit, and that is connected to the palace by like an underground tunnel. That's how he gets there, and he's always like there around. So I think this is hilarious for some reason, but in this time, there's four main factions of teams, and their names are the blues, greens, reds, and whites. Like that's it. There's named after a color.
It's like kind of like
Like
the
that's what they're
Harry
called.
Potter houses, except lamer.
A little bit, yeah. I guess I'd say more. I was gonna be like more death, but there's so much death in Harry Potter, so yes. They weren't just sports teams, they're also social groups. So you kind of like choose yours and like, be a hooligan. Like be like, this is my like I'm the greens, like you're the blues, like fuck the blues, all the things, like lots of fighting. Which again is fun. Sports fighting is fun as long as no one gets hurt. But
But,
people are about to get hurt.
but
So
I feel like in this era, it wouldn't be fun in this era because there's no rules or laws, and like people would
right, absolutely.
like now you
Yeah, there's
get
no police.
prosecuted, but like yeah,
Yeah. I mean, again, to bring up Philly, like that's where you get punched in the face if like your team beats Philly and you're like in Philly. But for the most part, it's fun.
that's also
Huh.
partially why I have deliberately never been to an Eagles game because
Yeah, no,
because it just feels like a really bad place to be a sports fan of a rival team.
absolutely. Absolutely. In this time, the blues are associated with the aristocracy because like the emperor supports them. They were more traditional, more like wealthy fans. And the greens were associated with the lower classes and tended to be more populist. They were like more progressive, more people who like lived in the suburbs, like more common people liked the greens. So at this time, by the time we're in this story, it's really just the greens and the blues. Those are like the biggest two sides. The Greens don't like the Queen and the King or the Emperor and Empress because they like the blues. So it's like a whole thing like Justinian and Theodora, they support the blues. And so all the regular people who are Greens are also like mad at the Emperor. So it's like a whole thing. there's also a lot happening with like the emperor's taxing people for wars and taxing people to like build stuff for himself, and people are hungry, and all like political unrest things actually happening while this is happening. But it's gonna kind of culminate at this sports event. On January 10th, 532, there's a mini riot, and there's lots of riots, like kind of all the time. But there's a mini riot between the Greens and the Blues, and 7 men get sentenced to death. So 2
Whoa.
of the men, yeah. So like the emperor is like, stop fighting. The leader is sentenced to death. So
Was it
obviously, like
all
that's a big thing too.
Greens?
Like, no, it was half blues, half 7. Like it was mixed blues and greens. And when they do the execution, they do it by hanging, and 2 of the men survive because the scaffolding breaks. And it's 1 blue and 1 green. So now they're kind of together and saying, like, maybe God is on our side, like the side of the people, because the emperor wanted the blues and greens to get, like the leaders of this like mini riot to get killed, but maybe now God's on our side because he saved them.
I mean, that tracks. Yeah. I mean, but I feel
So
like if I was the emperor, I'd say like now y'all just have to each fight to the death, and whoever wins. This is why I shouldn't be a leader, actually.
yeah, no, they didn't. They let them go. Now tensions are like super high because people are like wondering what the hell's going on because of the way that those like a green and a blue were saved. Justinian, instead of like canceling upcoming chariot races, he continued to have them. And another thing about the Hippodrome is, like I said before, like that's how they got in. The emperor and empress and like the court would get in through a secret tunnel from the palace and then like be in the Hippodrome on their like box again. Like think of Gladiator, like they're up higher than
Yeah,
everybody else.
I have the picture up right now. Like, there's an obvious like I'm assuming that the Hippodrome all has like one kind of like from the top level down looks the same, except there's one section
Mhm.
of it that's like this white obelisk looking thing that looks
Yeah,
like it's connected to like a court area, like a royal
exactly.
court area. So I would assume that's where it is.
Yeah. Like when you're watching a game and you're like, they show you someone like up in a box and you're like,
Right.
okay, fine. That's not relatable. Yeah. But this is the only space where the common people ever really see the emperor. So it's also a time for like political things. So they like yell up to him, like, we want less taxes, and like a lot of yelling and like chanting and things that they want the emperor to hear because he doesn't really see the common people
Makes
ever.
sense.
So that happens, these things as well. So on January 15th, 532, so 10 days after this first mini riot, there's another race planned for the day, and it starts to break out into another riot. There's 24 races planned. They don't get to that many. People start to fight. There's some like fighting within the people watching. It starts to get bigger and bigger, and the fight spills over into the city. The crowd starts shouting, Nika, Nika, which means victory, conquer. So that's why it's called the Nika Riots, because they are trying to like overthrow the government because now it's an insurrection. They're trying to overthrow the emperor. So all these people, all these tensions from the sports and all these things are rampaging the city. They're setting the city on fire. Constantinople is burning. They're looting shops. The palace was besieged, so they took over the palace. It was about to completely collapse, and Justinian was considering just leaving at this point.
And everybody here's just shit house hammered on wine, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You gotta
And
be.
like, yeah, no, that I don't think
I
it
don't
was
know.
water.
A belly full of wine wouldn't make me want to like be active.
I think
I feel like beer is a good riot. Beer and whiskey are
it
good
is.
rioting drinks.
Yeah, I think beer's a good riot drink. Yeah, but all they really had was wine. So I imagine like everyone's kind of stained with red wine and blood. You know, like it's a whole thing.
Could you imagine like if you were just like drunk on cosmopolitans and like trying to flip over like a car? Like it just what I don't know. It just doesn't have the
Exactly, that doesn't
same
work.
tone to it.
No, no. But I'm sure straight vodka inspired a lot of riots in Russia. So
Oh yeah,
it's different. The city is about to burn down. The Hagia Sophia is burned. So how do you know what that is, that building?
never heard
It's
of it.
it is a religious building in the middle of Constantinople, Istanbul. It was built before this time. It started off as a church. It's like a beautiful dome with turrets. It kind of looks like it has a Taj Mahal look with like the dome and the 4 turrets. It's really beautiful on the inside. I definitely did a paper about it when I was studying art history. So like it's like a beautiful building. It was burned down and they built a new one after this, and it started off as a church. Then
Is it called
it was
Hagia
built as a
Sophia?
yeah,
Got it.
yeah. Haiga, but I think it's Hagia Sophia. And so it was built during the Byzantine Empire, during this time, like kind of refurbished after this fire as a Christian cathedral. It was converted into a mosque after the Ottoman conquest that we talked about in 1453. So much later, it became a mosque. And then the Turkish Republic took it over in 1935 and turned it into a museum. But in 2020, the Turkish government took it back, and now it is a mosque
It's
again.
beautiful. I mean, I'm looking at the view
Yeah.
of the inside, the dome interior on Wikipedia, and it's amazing looking.
Yeah. It's really, really beautiful. So now it's a mosque, but just, and it's one of those things I think we actually talked about with the Taj Mahal too, where Christians are like, it was originally ours. And they're like, no, it's ours. And people are kind of trying to fight over who gets to worship there. I think
People
makes more
never
sense as a
change.
museum.
People never
Yeah.
change.
Yeah. Never change. So Hagia Sophia is burning, the city's burning on January 19th, so 4 days after the start of the riot. The people choose another nephew of Justin to be emperor. His name is Hypatius, and they put Hypatius on the throne in the Hippodrome, and they're like, we have a new emperor. So things look really, really bad for Justinian and Theodora, and they're thinking of leaving. And she says to him, this is a quote, and it's going to be hard. If you, my lord, wish to save your skin, you will have no difficulty in doing so. We are rich, there is the sea, there too are our ships. But consider first whether when you reach safety will you regret that you did not choose death in preference. As for me, I stand by the ancient saying, the purple is the noblest winding sheet. So she is like, you have to stay. Like you can't, like, we could run away, but like let's stay and fight for our empire.
What's the purple thing mean?
Purple is the color of emperors. It was a hard color to come by. So like they would wear like purple capes and
Oh, okay.
purple shrouds. So
Yep.
like Caesar wore purple. Like purple was the color that you would wear when you were in charge.
Yeah, she's saying like be a leader.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. So he says, I'm going to stay and I'm going to stand tall on this. And he had his army led by General Belisarius suppress the riots. And so here's some stuff that happened. So like I said before, there was a mini riot that started this. There's tons of riots during this time. We know a lot about this one because it was like heavily documented, but there probably were worse ones that we just like don't know a ton about. But this is the one we know the most about. So Belisarius takes finally the Justinian says go. He takes the troops. They go out and they just start like killing the people who are rioting. They end up going to the Hippodrome. So the Hippodrome had become kind of a sanctuary. People are talking there. The new emperor they made, Hypatius, is there. A lot of families, people are just like kind of hiding and trying to stay in this spot while the rest of the city is like on fire and crazy things are happening. But Belisarius and his troops come in and they kill everybody. It's estimated they killed 30,000 people inside the Hippodrome that day.
So Taylor, sorry, I'm confusing some people here. Is this the current emperor who slaughtered his people, or the newly crowned emperor? Okay,
the current emperor, Justinian.
I have such a disconnect there because it's like I'm gonna be a lead. You know what I pictured? I pictured this like proud moment of like just like a gladiator movie of like the empress like stealing the nerve of the emperor. Like, you can do this. You are the god sent, king or whatever. And then he just like goes and kills everyone. Like I didn't see it going that way.
Well, that's what happens, and that later, one of the outcomes of this Nika riot is it weakened the power of the factions, so like the blues and the greens, the political factions, and it served as a warning that the emperor would not hesitate to use force to stop a rebellion.
Yeah.
So before, when maybe you were like, maybe he won't kill innocent people to stop us from doing this, it's like, no, if you do this and you get out of order, like we will come in with the army and you will get killed.
I still don't think that's leadership or good leadership.
I mean, it's not great.
Okay.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
No, it's definitely real scary. Yeah. Yeah. The Belisarius and his troops go in and they kill 30,000 people in the Hippodrome. So like think of the logistics and how gross this is. I read a Smithsonian article and they quoted an author, John Julius Norwich, on his history of Byzantium. And he says, quote, within a few minutes, the angry shouts of the great amphitheater had given place to cries and groans of wounded and dying men. Soon those too grew quiet until the silence spread over the entire arena, its sand now sodden with the blood of its victims. So like a shit ton of people got killed there. Yeah. The outcome is that, the people kind of were like, they stopped rioting and Justinian became powerful again. Like you said, it was a controversial decision. And it's been criticized by history because a lot of the people were unarmed civilians, but it also has been like seen as necessary as history to prevent future uprisings. So it's kind of like in a smaller scale, like dropping the nuclear bomb. You know, like, do you do it to like stop further war? Is that justified?
I'm trying to put this in context that I would understand, and because you brought up January 6th already, I'm like, how would I feel if like the National Guard or whoever just like mowed people down as they like entered the Capitol building? Then I was like, would
Yeah,
it
no,
really
I'd feel
feel?
terrible.
I don't
No,
know.
I know. No, I would feel terrible. You know, like those people are dumb, but you can't do that. But if they did do that, then you definitely have like a whole new feeling about the government where you'd be like legitimately very, 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 very scared.
Yeah,
You know?
it's like a two-pronged thing. One is like the moral implications of just doing that to another human, and
Yeah,
then there's the like democracy ramifications. Like, what does that actually mean for the country as a whole? So, yeah,
exactly.
generally
Yeah,
probably not a good
exactly.
move.
No, but it was for Justinian. He was still emperor. He was emperor for another 33 years after this. So he definitely like held on to his spot. He wrote a Justinian code, which is like something that's a basis for law for a lot of Europe still. He rebuilt Hagia Sophia, did a bunch of like stuff for like education with Theodora. She died in 1548. He lived longer. He died in not 15, in 548. She died in 548. He died in 565 at the age of 83. So he, got to live a long life as emperor. He was succeeded by his nephew Justin II, and he had been co-emperor for a little bit, and it just kind of continues like, nephews and sons, and eventually, there's more tragedy, and 1,000 years later, the Ottoman Empire takes over. All kinds of stuff happens in this part of the world. We'll probably come back to it, but that's the story of Justinian and how he ordered 30,000 people at least to be murdered to maintain power. I don't know. Was that good or bad? I don't know. Was Theodora the one who kind of convinced him to do it? What would their life have been like if they weren't together? Was it always a powder keg? So I don't know. Let's think about. Very bloody.
I'm gonna see what the largest rebellion death is in the world. Okay, 20 to 70 million.
Whoa. Well, that's like over a long time, not like a day.
I don't know. I don't know what this rebellion is. Taiping? What is that? Okay, so yeah, that would have been over the course of 16 years or 14 years. That would have
Yeah.
been a long rebellion. Okay. That sounds like a war. That does not sound like a 1 day rebellion thing.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it was like 5 days. So 5 days from the first mini rebellion, 5 days later, or 10 days. So 5 days later is um the two men survive the attempted hanging. They have another race on the 15th. That's when the riots start. And by like the 19th, he has everybody killed. So it happens real fast.
wow.
It's a rough January for the folks
Yeah,
of Constantinople. Yeah.
no kidding. Interesting. I wonder if those two guys made it out alive completely.
It's a good question.
Yeah,
Maybe had already left and been like,
like
get out of here while the iron is cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
I like it. Can I make a special request since you're the history buff?
Yeah.
Okay,
Hmm.
I should probably know more about my ancestry than I actually do. So can you like do one on Persia? Like ancient
Yeah, lots
Persia?
of stuff happened in Persia. Yeah. I
I've heard.
think we've been there a little bit. Well, we were kind of there. Well, ancient Persia was kind of like coming down during the into India for like the Taj Mahal. There was some, like Persian stuff in there, but let's definitely do more. So I see, yeah, it's so much of the same place, like
Yeah, that part of the world
Macedonia,
just Macedonia. Yeah,
Greece.
that whole part of the world just seems like
Greece.
there's like a million ancient stories of things going
Yeah, it's
on.
so cool. Yeah, I'll find some. I mean, there's so much cool stuff that happened down there. So for sure.
Do you have any
For
special
sure.
requests for me, Taylor?
Um, no, I haven't thought about it, but I will think about it.
This is a new segment
Oh,
called Special Request Corner.
special request corner. We also are accepting special requests from you. Oh, like I'm gonna do the one my cousin sent me one to look at. And so yeah, we any story of like, something crazy that happened, let us know. There could be a
Yeah.
relationship involved. It doesn't have to be whatever. We got a
Changing
long way to
premise.
go.
We will shift the premise in whichever direction results in our imminent fame.
We're gonna do this forever until there are no more stories. So buckle up.
Fuck, that is a scary. We
Um,
got to screenshot you there.
Buttercups,
Terrifying.
buckle up. You
Keep
do
doing
it.
it. Keep doing it. There we go. I got it.
Perfect.
That's one on the Insta.
Cool. Yeah, find us on Doomed to Fail Pod on YouTube now and like our stuff. Subscribe, like, even if you listen to this, please share it. We want to, our numbers are definitely going up slowly, but they're going up and we're doing it. That's fun.
They are going up. They are going up. It's interesting because like the analytics, it depends on what analytics you pay attention to. The one I pay attention to is how many downloads we get based on when the episode is released, and that has gone up the most, which is really, really exciting.
Nice.
So
That's awesome.
please subscribe, tell your friends, rate, review. Again, you can turn the volume off and just like let it run on the playlist and just look. The algorithms don't know. The computers don't
Put it
know.
on your phone. Yeah.
This is like probably the last chance we're gonna have to outsmart the computers until ChatGPT takes over the world. So
I mean, I say we're going forever, and that could be like 2 more weeks.
I know.
So
I know.
who knows?
Someone's gonna invent a chatbot that can create like just amazing content.
I'm sure they
similarly.
can, and also be as charming as us. So it's over.
That I don't think is possible, but we'll see.
Hopefully, that's the one thing we can hang on to.
Hopefully. Cool. Well,
Well,
thanks
Farz.
everyone. Thanks, Taylor. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.